All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a case that was officially closed more than 40 years ago, but is still just swimming in mystery and doubt: the Atlanta child murders. You see, one man was convicted, but for so many people, the real story, well, it's nowhere near over.
So here's how we're going to break this all down. We'll start with the sheer terror that gripped the city of Atlanta. Then we'll look at the man they arrested, and then we're going to really unpack the super controversial evidence that keeps this whole case alive today.
Okay, first things first. To really get this case, you have to imagine what it was like to be in Atlanta between 1979 and 1981. This wasn't just a news story or a string of crimes. This was a citywide crisis, and it was absolutely fueled by fear.
I mean, for 2 solid years, a horrifying string of murders, mostly of black children and teenagers, created this atmosphere of just pure panic. The community was absolutely desperate for answers, which even led mothers to form their own groups to demand justice as that list of victims just kept growing.
So now let's look at how the investigation, which was under this incredible public pressure, started to zero in on one single man.
So, how did they land on Wayne Williams? Well, it all comes down to a moment in May of '81. Cops are staking out a bridge, and in the middle of the night they hear this big, loud splash. The first car that drives by right after belongs to Wayne Williams. Just 2 days later, another body is found in the river right below. Williams was eventually arrested and convicted for the murders of 2 adults. And with that, the police just attributed 22 other deaths to him, and boom, case is closed. For the authorities, Williams was the answer that ended the city's nightmare.
But here's the thing. The prosecution's case wasn't built on eyewitnesses, there was no confession. It was built on something much, much smaller: microscopic fibers.
The entire case for the state rested on forensic science. They linked these tiny fibers from Williams's home, his car, and even from his dog to multiple victims. An FBI expert got on the stand and testified that it was virtually impossible for these victims to have these specific fibers on them without having been in direct contact with Williams.
And this is where the prosecution really brings out its smoking gun. To hammer home to the jury just how incredibly unique this evidence was, they presented them with a single, powerful number. The experts said the odds of finding another home in all of Atlanta with this exact same carpet were just 1 in 7,792. Now, if you're on that jury, that number sounds an awful lot like certainty, doesn't it?
But even as the case was officially closed and the city breathed a sigh of relief, some really prominent thinkers, like the author James Baldwin, started asking deeper and frankly more uncomfortable questions.
Baldwin went to Atlanta to report on the trial, and he sensed that the official story was kind of papering over some very uncomfortable truths about race and class and power. He wasn't really there to solve a crime, he was there to understand the story that Atlanta was telling itself.
You see, he wasn't hunting for clues, he was digging for truths. Which leads to the big question, right? What was the actual truth behind that super solid-seeming scientific evidence?
And that question leads us right to the math behind that 1 in 7,792 number, a statistic that literally helps send a man to prison for the rest of his life.
So, back in 1984, the Georgia State University Law Review decided to do just that. They dug deep into the trial transcripts, and what they found, well, it raises some really serious doubts about how certain that number actually was.
So that statistic was about the probability of a randomly chosen home having this carpet. It was presented to the jury as this hard, scientific fact. But what the law review uncovered was that it was actually built on a whole pyramid of really questionable assumptions.
Yeah, so when you actually look at how they got that number, it's kind of shocking. This wasn't some airtight scientific process. It was basically a chain of unverified guesses, one stacked on top of the other. They started with incomplete sales data, guessed how much of that carpet even made it to Georgia, assumed it was all sold in Atlanta, and then assumed each sale went to a different house. Every single step was pure speculation, all designed to make this carpet seem exceptionally rare.
Okay, but here's where it gets really, really critical. This is the move that might have changed everything. In his closing argument, the prosecutor takes that statistic and he twists it. He subtly but completely changed what it meant. You see, the expert talked about the odds of picking one random home. The prosecutor told the jury those were the odds of another such home existing at all.
I mean, this wasn't just spinning it a little. This fundamentally misrepresented the data. The expert's own shaky math suggested there could have been 81 other homes in Atlanta with that same carpet, so the probability of another home existing was actually 100%.
But the jury was led to believe it was a 1 in 8,000 long shot, which painted Williams not as one of many possibilities, but as a statistical impossibility.
And this deeply flawed evidence is a huge reason why, for so many people, from journalists all the way to the victims' own families, the case of the Atlanta child murders has never, ever truly been solved.
And over the decades, the doubts have just piled up. There was an investigation into KKK involvement that was just quietly dropped. The FBI's own profiler, John Douglas, has said he believes Williams probably killed 11 of the victims, but that there wasn't strong evidence for all the murders. Then, in 2019, Atlanta's mayor actually ordered the evidence to be retested with modern DNA tech. And of course, there's James Baldwin's haunting conclusion that Wayne Williams wasn't the monster who preyed on the city's children, but just another one of its victims.
And so we're left not with a conclusion, but with a question. The very law review that picked apart that fiber evidence ended its analysis by raising the ultimate statistical question. What is the probability that Wayne Williams is an innocent man? It really leaves you wondering, were the scales of justice balanced by real evidence, or were they just tipped by fear and a city's desperate need for an answer? Any answer at all.